My daughter delivered a package to the wrong mansion. Then the billionaire whispered her mother's name. My hands were stained with the scent of lilies and roses when my phone buzzed, a sharp sound that shattered the quiet hum of my flower shop. I stared at the screen, my heart stopping as the words burned into my vision. It was a text from my daughter. Mom, I'm at the Westwood estate. The package got delivered to the wrong address. The owner saw your name on the delivery slip. He's shaking, Mom. He whispered your name like he'd seen a ghost. Should I give him your number? In that second, the floor beneath me seemed to disappear. Have you ever had a single text message make 20 years of distance vanish in an instant? My carefully constructed life, the shop, the flowers, the peace I had fought so hard for, was suddenly colliding with a past I had spent 2 decades trying to bury. My daughter had accidentally stepped through the wrong iron gates, and now the billionaire who once promised me the world wanted to see me again. The man whose family had destroyed my spirit. The man who still had no idea he was looking at his own child. Hello, my beautiful queens. Today's story is about those chapters we thought were closed forever, only for them to reopen when we least expect it. It's about a mother's secret, a billionaire's regret, and the strength it takes to face a man who doesn't know the truth you've been carrying for 19 years. Everything okay, Joe? Asked Marlene, my assistant manager, her voice cutting through my frozen state as she noticed my expression. Fine, I managed, though my voice sounded distant even to my own ears. Audrey's just having some trouble with a delivery. I stepped into the back office, away from curious eyes, and called my daughter immediately. My heart pounded against my ribs as I waited for her to answer. Audrey? What's going on? Mom! My 19-year-old's voice was breathless with excitement. I was delivering those centerpieces to the Blackwell wedding at Oakridge Manor, but I must have put the wrong address in the GPS. I ended up at this massive estate with these huge iron gates. Westwood Estate, I whispered, the name feeling foreign on my tongue after so many years of careful avoidance. Yeah, so I explained to the security guard that I had made a mistake, but he called up to the main house anyway. Then this man came down the driveway. Mom, he drives a Bentley. And when I apologized and showed him the delivery slip with your name on it as the florist, he got this really strange look on his face. He asked if you were Josephine Winters, formerly Josephine Calloway from Meadowbrook. When I said yes, he asked if he could speak with you. I closed my eyes, my free hand gripping the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Audrey, I need you to leave. Right now. But Mom, he seems really nice and important. He's wearing a suit that probably costs more than our car. Audrey, please. I fought to keep my voice steady. Just tell him you need to deliver those centerpieces. That's your job. There was a pause. Then Audrey's voice dropped to a whisper. He's offering to pay for the centerpieces and have them delivered to the right address. He says he hasn't seen you in 20 years and would really like to talk. 20 years. Had it really been that long? 20 years since that summer that had changed everything. 20 years of building a life that had nothing to do with Richard Westwood or the world he inhabited. Mom, are you still there? I took a deep breath. Yes, tell him. What could I possibly say? Tell him I'll call him. Really? Audrey sounded surprised. Yes, get his number and come straight back to the shop. After hanging up, I sank into my chair, memories flooding back with such force that I felt physically winded. Richard Westwood. The summer I was 22. The promises made and broken. The choices that had shaped everything that came after. I had built a good life in the aftermath. My thriving flower shop, my beautiful daughter, our cozy home in the historic district of Laurelwood. I had no regrets. But now the past had found me anyway, delivered right to Richard Westwood's doorstep by my own daughter. Richard Westwood stood in his study, staring out at the manicured grounds of the estate that had been in his family for generations. The young woman, Audrey, had left 30 minutes ago, but he remained rooted to the spot, unable to focus on the quarterly reports waiting on his desk or the 3 missed calls from his executive team. Josephine Calloway, now Josephine Winters. He had searched for her once, years ago, when the pain of their parting had finally dulled enough that he thought he could face her again. But she had vanished from Meadowbrook, leaving no forwarding address, no social media presence, nothing for him to trace. And now her daughter, a poised young woman with Josephine's amber eyes and determined chin, had appeared at his gate like an apparition from the past. His phone rang, displaying an unfamiliar local number. His heart rate quickened as he answered. Richard Westwood. A pause, then a voice he would have recognized anywhere. Richard, it's Josephine. He closed his eyes, gripping the phone tighter. Josephine, thank you for calling. Audrey said you wanted to speak with me. Her voice was different, more confident, with a subtle edge that hadn't been there before. But underneath, he could still hear the warmth that had drawn him to her all those years ago. Yes, it was quite a surprise, seeing your name on that delivery slip. I imagine it was. Her tone gave nothing away. I'd like to see you, Josephine, to talk. It's been a long time. Another pause, longer this time. He could almost see her weighing her options, considering the implications of reopening a door that had been firmly closed for 2 decades. I don't think that's a good idea, Richard. Please. The word escaped before he could consider his dignity. Just coffee. Public place of your choosing. One conversation after 20 years doesn't seem like too much to ask. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken history. Fine, she finally said. Coffee. Tomorrow at Perkins Cafe on Main Street. 10 o'clock. I'll be there. After she hung up, Richard moved to his desk and opened the bottom drawer, the one he rarely accessed. From beneath a stack of old correspondence, he withdrew a small velvet box, its surface dulled with age. Inside was the ring he had purchased 20 years ago, a 3-carat emerald surrounded by diamonds, chosen to match the remarkable green of Josephine's eyes when she laughed. He had never returned it, never given it to anyone else. Some part of him had always known that Josephine Calloway was the only woman he would ever want to give it to. Tomorrow he would see her again. Not to offer the ring, that would be presumptuous beyond measure, but perhaps to understand, finally, why she had disappeared from his life without a word, leaving him with nothing but questions and regrets. You're going to meet him? Audrey's eyes widened as she arranged tulips in the shop's front window display. Who exactly is this guy, Mom? You've never mentioned anyone named Richard Westwood before. I carefully trimmed the stems of a dozen white roses, focusing on the task to avoid my daughter's curious gaze. He's someone I knew a long time ago, before you were born. He's crazy rich. That estate is like something out of a movie. Audrey paused, studying my face. Was he like an old boyfriend or something? My hands stilled. Something like that. Mom! Audrey abandoned the tulips and came to stand beside me. What aren't you telling me? You've been weird ever since I mentioned his name. I set down my scissors and faced my daughter. At 19, Audrey was no longer a child, though I sometimes still saw her that way. She had grown into a thoughtful, perceptive young woman who deserved more than evasions. Richard and I knew each other the summer after I graduated college. It was intense, but it ended badly. How badly? I sighed. Badly enough that I left town and never looked back. Audrey's eyes widened. Wow, that's dramatic. Even for you. Despite myself, I smiled. Even for me, yes. So why agree to see him now? It was a fair question, one I had been asking myself since I'd made the decision. I'm not entirely sure, I admitted. Curiosity, maybe, or perhaps just to prove to myself that he has no power over me anymore. Audrey studied me with those perceptive eyes that sometimes seemed to see right through me. Do you want me to come with you? I could sit at another table, for moral support. I shook my head. No, sweetheart. This is something I need to do alone. I touched her cheek gently. But thank you for offering. Later that night, after Audrey had gone to bed, I stood in front of my closet, absurdly concerned about what to wear to meet a ghost from my past. Nothing too formal. I didn't want Richard to think I had made a special effort. But nothing too casual either, as if the meeting meant nothing to me. I finally settled on a simple emerald green wrap dress that brought out the color of my eyes, paired with low heels and the silver pendant my mother had given me for my 30th birthday. professional but feminine, appropriate for a woman who had built a successful business and raised a daughter on her own. As I hung the dress on my closet door, my gaze fell on the small wooden box tucked on the top shelf. Before I could reconsider, I pulled it down and opened it, revealing a stack of faded photographs and letters bound with a silk ribbon. The top photo showed a younger version of myself, laughing as I sat on a picnic blanket beside a handsome dark-haired man whose smile was focused entirely on me. We looked impossibly young, impossibly happy, impossibly unaware of what lay ahead. I traced the outline of Richard's face with my fingertip. He had been beautiful then, all sharp angles and intense eyes, with a smile that transformed his serious expression into something breathtaking. From what I had glimpsed in the brief description Audrey had provided, the years had been kind to him. The thought sent an unexpected flutter through my stomach. I quickly returned the photo to the box and replaced it on the shelf. Tomorrow would be difficult enough without drowning in memories tonight. As I turned out the light, my phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. "I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, Josephine." Richard. I stared at the screen, wondering how he had obtained my personal number, then remembered that Audrey had likely given it to him. The simple message shouldn't have affected me, but something about seeing his name on my phone, this intrusion of the past into my carefully ordered present, left me feeling unsettled. I didn't reply. 20 years earlier, the Meadowbrook Charity Garden Gala was in full swing when I arrived, balancing trays of flower arrangements on both arms. At 22, fresh out of college with a degree in botany and a mountain of student debt, I was grateful for any work I could get with Elaine's florals, even if it meant being invisible help at events where people spent more on a single dinner than I made in a month. "Those go on the tables near the fountain," Mrs. Elaine directed, barely glancing my way as she supervised the placement of the larger arrangements. "And for heaven's sake, try not to bump into anyone important." I nodded, carefully making my way through the crowd of designer dresses and tailored suits. The Westwood Estate Gardens were legendary in Meadowbrook. 5 acres of meticulously maintained formal gardens, with a central fountain that had been imported from Italy a century ago. Under different circumstances, I would have loved to explore them properly, to study the rare specimens and thoughtful design. Instead, I kept my eyes down, focused on not spilling water on anyone's expensive shoes. I was arranging the last centerpiece when a deep voice spoke behind me. "Those are extraordinary. Not the usual predictable roses and hydrangeas." I turned to find myself face to face with a man about my age, though everything else about him, from his perfectly tailored tuxedo to his confident stance, marked him as belonging to a different world entirely. He was studying the arrangement with genuine interest, not just making polite conversation. "Thank you," I said, surprised by the observation. I chose meadow flowers and native grasses. They felt more honest for a garden event than imported hothouse blooms. He smiled, and something shifted in the air between us. "Honest flowers. I like that." He extended his hand. "Richard Westwood." My eyes widened slightly. The Westwood heir himself, not just a random guest. I wiped my damp palm on my black pants before taking his hand. "Josephine Calloway. I'm with the florist." I gathered that. His eyes, a striking blue that contrasted with his dark hair, held mine with unexpected warmth. "Are you a botanist, Josephine Calloway? You speak about flowers like someone who knows them, not just arranges them." "I have a degree in botany, yes, but the job market for botanists isn't exactly booming. So I work for Mrs. Elaine while I figure out my next step." He nodded thoughtfully. "Would you show me what makes these arrangements special? I'm curious now." I glanced around nervously. "I'm supposed to finish setting up and then stay out of sight. Your mother probably wouldn't appreciate me giving botanical lectures to the host. My mother is busy impressing the governor's wife, and I'm bored to death." He grinned, a flash of boyish charm breaking through his polished exterior. "Save me with flower talk, Josephine." Against my better judgment, I found myself smiling back. "Well, these tall grasses are native to meadows just north of here. They're considered weeds by most people, but look at the structure they provide, the movement. For the next 15 minutes, I forgot where I was, who he was, as I explained the composition of the arrangements, the symbolism of the wildflowers, the sustainability of using local blooms. Richard listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions that revealed a surprising knowledge of the estate's gardens. You know quite a bit about plants for someone who... I trailed off, realizing I was about to say something potentially offensive. For someone born with a silver spoon? He finished, looking amused rather than insulted. The gardens were my grandfather's passion. He taught me everything he knew before he died. It's the one part of the estate I actually care about. Before I could respond, a sharp voice cut through our conversation. Richard, darling, the Montgomerys are asking for you. An elegant woman in her 50s approached, her gaze sliding over me with practiced dismissal. I believe the staff should be finished setting up by now. The warmth in Richard's expression cooled instantly. Mother, this is Josephine Calloway. She's a botanist who designed these remarkable arrangements. How lovely, his mother said without interest. The Montgomerys, Richard. He gave me an apologetic look. It was a pleasure meeting you, Josephine. Perhaps we'll talk again. I nodded, already stepping back into my invisible role. Enjoy your evening, Mr. Westwood. I didn't expect to see him again. Men like Richard Westwood didn't pursue connections with women who arranged flowers at their mother's charity events. I returned to the catering tent, helping prepare the take-home bouquets for guests, pushing away the memory of blue eyes and an unexpected conversation about wildflowers. So when he appeared at the tent entrance 2 hours later, I nearly dropped the roses I was dead-horning. I've been looking for you, he said without preamble. Would you like to see the moonlight garden? It was my grandfather's pride and joy, designed to be viewed after dark. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. I'm working. The event is winding down. I already spoke with Mrs. Elaine. She said you're finished for the night. I glanced at my boss, who was watching our interaction with undisguised curiosity. She gave me a small nod. I'm not dressed for a garden tour, I said, gesturing to my practical black pants and white shirt, stained with water and pollen. Richard shrugged. The flowers won't mind. Neither do I. Something about his directness, the absence of pretense, made me set down my clippers. All right, a quick tour. The moonlight garden was tucked behind a tall hedge of yew trees, invisible from the main party area. As we stepped through the arched entrance, I gasped softly. White flowers of every variety glowed in the darkness, illuminated by strategically placed landscape lighting and the full moon overhead. The air was heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and moonflowers. It's designed to be experienced at night, Richard explained, his voice quieter now, as if respecting the magic of the space. Every plant either blooms white or has silver-toned foliage. My grandfather spent years perfecting it. I moved slowly along the path, identifying each specimen with growing excitement. White foxgloves, silver artemisia. Look at these enormous moonflowers. I've never seen them grow so large. Richard watched me with a smile. You really do love plants. They're honest, I said, echoing my earlier words. They don't pretend to be something they're not. A rose doesn't try to be a lily. A moonflower doesn't bloom in daylight just because someone wants it to. And people aren't like that? I glanced at him, suddenly aware of how philosophical I sounded. In my experience, rarely. We walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the sounds of the party fading behind us. I was acutely conscious of his presence beside me. This man who moved through the world with such ease, who seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts about flowers and honesty. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? He asked suddenly. I stopped walking. Dinner? Yes, that meal people typically eat in the evening. His eyes crinkled with amusement. I'd like to continue our conversation somewhere. We won't be interrupted by my mother or charity obligations. I don't think that's a good idea, I said carefully. Why not? I gestured between us. Because you're you, and I'm me. We don't exactly move in the same circles. I'm asking you to dinner, Josephine, not proposing marriage. His directness was disarming. I enjoyed talking with you. I'd like to do more of it. It's that simple. But it wasn't simple. Nothing about Richard Westwood could possibly be simple. Still, as I looked at him standing among the moonlit flowers, I found myself nodding. Okay, dinner. His smile in that moment was like watching the sun rise. Gradual, then suddenly brilliant. I'll pick you up at 7. Present day. Perkins Cafe was busy with the mid-morning crowd when I arrived, precisely at 10 o'clock. I had chosen the location deliberately, a popular local establishment where I was known and respected, far removed from the exclusive restaurants and private clubs that had been Richard's world. I spotted him immediately, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall. Some habits never changed. Richard had always preferred to see who was coming and going. He was dressed more casually than I had expected, dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt rather than the power suits he had favored in his youth. His dark hair was now threaded with silver at the temples, and fine lines had formed at the corners of his eyes, but he was unmistakably the same man who had captured my heart 2 decades earlier. He stood as I approached, his expression a careful mask that revealed nothing of what he might be feeling. Josephine. My name on his lips still had the power to affect me, though I was careful not to show it. Thank you for coming, Richard. I took the seat across from him, placing my purse on the empty chair beside me like a barrier. You look well, as do you. His eyes moved over my face with an intensity that made my skin warm. Better than well, actually. You're more beautiful now than you were at 22. I had forgotten his directness, the way he stated his observations as simple facts rather than compliments designed to flatter. Time has been kind, I said neutrally. To both of us, it seems. A server approached and I ordered my usual, a cappuccino with an extra shot. Richard asked for black coffee, another unchanged detail that struck me with unexpected force. When we were alone again, an awkward silence fell between us. 20 years of unspoken words hung in the air, making small talk impossible but deeper conversation too daunting to begin. Your daughter seems remarkable, Richard said finally. Poised, intelligent. You must be very proud. I am. I smiled on safer ground when discussing Audrey. She's everything I could have hoped for. She has your eyes. And your determination. Yes, she does. I paused, then added, she's studying environmental science at Laurelwood University. Full scholarship. Pride colored my voice, and Richard nodded in appreciation. Impressive, though not surprising, given who her mother is. Our drinks arrived, providing a momentary reprieve from the conversation. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, gathering my thoughts. Why did you want to see me, Richard? I asked finally, meeting his gaze directly. What could we possibly have to say to each other after all this time? He set down his coffee, his expression turning serious. I wanted answers, I suppose. You disappeared, Josephine. One day we were planning a future, and the next you were gone. No explanation, no forwarding address, nothing. I left a letter, I said quietly. A letter that explained nothing. A flash of the old anger surfaced briefly in his eyes. You said you couldn't be part of my world, that we wanted different things. After 3 months of telling me you loved me, that you wanted the same future I did. I looked down at my cappuccino, watching the foam slowly dissolve into the espresso beneath. I meant everything I said to you that summer, Richard. But some realities can't be overcome with just love and good intentions. What realities? That I was from a wealthy family and you weren't? That never mattered to me. It mattered to everyone else. I met his gaze again, steadier now. To your parents, who made it very clear I wasn't the right kind of woman for their son and heir. To your friends, who treated me like an amusing diversion you would eventually outgrow. To the board of your family's company, who had apparently already discussed the public relations implications of you marrying the landscaper's daughter. Richard's expression hardened. Who told you that? About the board. Your mother, the last time I saw her. She invited me to lunch, without you knowing, of course. She explained very kindly that while I seemed like a lovely girl, I needed to understand that your life wasn't entirely your own, that you had responsibilities to your family, to to the company, to a legacy that stretched back generations. My voice remained steady, though the memory still had the power to sting. She said the board had concerns about how the markets would react to you marrying someone with no social standing or business connections. My mother had no right. She had every right, I interrupted. She was protecting her son and the company she and your father had built. And she wasn't wrong, Richard. We came from different worlds. I would have never fit into yours. That wasn't your decision to make alone, Richard said, an edge creeping into his voice. You should have told me about that conversation. We could have faced it together. Could we? I raised an eyebrow. You were 26, newly appointed to the board, eager to prove yourself worthy of the Westwood name. Would you really have defied your family, your responsibilities, everything you'd been raised to value? For me, the question hung between us, unanswerable after so many years. Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't immediately respond. That's what I thought, I said softly. I made the choice that seemed right at the time, for both of us. And now, Richard leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. Looking back with 20 years of perspective, do you still think it was the right choice? The question caught me off guard. I had expected recriminations, perhaps even anger, but not this invitation to reevaluate the past. I don't know, I admitted. I built a good life, Richard. I have my business, my daughter, friends who care about me. I can't regret the path that led me here. Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, or resignation. Of course, I wouldn't expect you to. Another silence fell between us, less tense than before but filled with a different kind of weight. The acknowledgement of paths not taken, lives not shared. Your flower shop, Richard said finally. Audrey mentioned it's called Winter's Blooms. It seems you've done well for yourself. I nodded, grateful for the change of subject. It started small, just me and a rented storefront on Cedar Street. Now we have 3 locations and a thriving wedding and event business. I'm not surprised. You always had a gift with flowers. A small smile touched his lips. I remember that arrangement you created for my mother's birthday. Peonies and something with small blue flowers. Delphiniums, I supplied automatically. I'm surprised you remember that. I remember everything about that summer, Josephine. The simple statement hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to address. I glanced at my watch, suddenly needing to escape the intensity of his gaze. I should get back to the shop. The Saturday rush will be starting soon. Richard nodded, accepting my retreat with grace. Thank you for meeting me, for answering at least some of my questions. As we stood to leave, he hesitated, then asked, would it be possible for me to meet Audrey properly? Not as a delivery person who accidentally came to my house, but as your daughter. The careful way he phrased it, your daughter, not our daughter, made me wonder if he suspected the truth. I had never confirmed Audrey's age during our conversation. Had he done the math? I don't think that's necessary, I said more sharply than I intended. Richard's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Of course, it was just a thought. He paid for our coffees despite my protest, and we walked to the door in uncomfortable silence. Outside on the sidewalk, the bright October sunshine seemed at odds with the heaviness between us. It was good to see you, Josephine, Richard said formally, as if we were business acquaintances parting after a meeting. You too, Richard. He hesitated, then added, if you change your mind, about Audrey, or anything else, you have my number. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I watched him walk away, his tall figure moving confidently through the crowd, I felt a complex mixture of relief and regret. I had survived seeing Richard Westwood again. The world hadn't ended, but I knew with absolute certainty that this wouldn't be the last time our paths crossed. Sisters, have you ever had someone from your past reappear unexpectedly? Share your experience in the comments below. 20 years earlier, that first dinner led to another and another. Richard took me to small, out-of-the-way restaurants where no one knew him, where we could talk for hours without interruption. He was different away from Westwood Estate, more relaxed, funnier, eager to hear my thoughts on everything from environmental conservation to classic literature. "You're not what I expected," I told him one evening as we walked along the riverfront after dinner. "What did you expect? An entitled trust fund kid who only talks about his yacht and investment portfolio." He was smiling, but I sensed a genuine question beneath the teasing. "Something like that," I admitted. "But you're thoughtful. You listen. You care about things that matter. Like honest flowers?" He took my hand, his fingers warm against mine in the cool evening air. "Like honest flowers," I agreed, letting him pull me closer. When he kissed me that night, stars reflected in the river beside us, I knew I was falling into something dangerous. Richard Westwood lived in a world I could only visit, not inhabit. But in that moment, with his arms around me and the taste of him on my lips, I couldn't bring myself to care. The summer unfolded like a dream. Picnics in hidden corners of the Westwood Gardens. Late-night conversations on the phone when he returned from business trips. Weekend drives to the coast in his convertible, the wind tangling my hair as he told me about his plans to modernize his family's company, to use their resources for environmental initiatives and sustainable development. "My father thinks I'm naive," he confessed as we walked barefoot along the beach. "He built Westwood Industries the old way, oil, timber, real estate development with no concern for environmental impact. He doesn't understand that the future lies in sustainability." "And the board? Do they support your vision?" I asked, genuinely curious about the world he navigated. "Some do. Others think like my father." He shrugged, picking up a perfect $100 and handing it to me. "But I'm patient. I'll bring them around eventually." I tucked the $100 into my pocket, a talisman of this perfect day. "I admire that about you. Your determination to change things from within." He stopped walking, turning to face me with sudden intensity. "That's why I need you, Josephine. You see me. Not the Westwood heir, not the fortune, just me. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" Before I could respond, he pulled me into his arms, kissing me with a passion that left me breathless. We made love for the first time that night, in a small beachfront inn where no one knew his name. As I fell asleep in his arms, I allowed myself to believe, just for a moment, that our worlds could somehow merge into one. Richard began bringing me to smaller social events, gallery openings, charity auctions, dinner parties with the younger, more progressive members of his social circle. Some accepted me easily, interested in my knowledge of botany and environmental science. Others were politely distant, their smiles never reaching their eyes as they assessed my department store clothes and lack of family connections. "Ignore them," Richard would whisper, his hand protective at the small of my back. "They don't matter." But they did matter. They were part of his world, the world he was asking me to join. Each event was a reminder of how different our lives had been, how much I would have to adapt to fit into his reality. Still, when he took me to his private apartment in the city, a place separate from the Westwood estate, decorated with modern art and filled with books, I could almost imagine a future together. In that space, with just the two of us, the outside world with all its judgments and expectations seemed distant and unimportant. "Move in with me," he said one night as we lay tangled in his sheets, the city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. "This place feels empty when you're not here." "Richard, we've only known each other for 2 months. I reminded him, though my heart raced at the suggestion. "I don't care. I've never felt this way about anyone." He propped himself up on one elbow, his expression serious in the dim light. "I love you, Josephine. I want to build a life with you." The words I had both longed for and dreaded hung in the air between us. "Your family would never accept me," I said softly. "They'll come around once they truly know you. And if they don't," he shrugged. "I'm not a child. I don't need their permission to love who I love." It sounded so simple when he said it like that. And in the safety of his apartment, with his arms around me and his heartbeat steady against my cheek, I let myself believe him. "I love you too," I whispered. "But I need time to think about moving in together." He kissed me softly. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." A week later, I received the invitation to lunch with Eleanor Westwood. Present day. I was arranging a bridal consultation bouquet when Audrey burst into the shop, her eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, you won't believe who just called the shop line asking for you." My stomach dropped. "Richard Westwood." "Yes. How did you know?" She leaned against the counter, studying my face. "He wants to order flowers. A lot of flowers, apparently, for some charity event at his estate next weekend." I set down the roses I was holding, careful to keep my expression neutral. "Did you take the order?" "I told him you'd call him back. This is a big order, Mom. Like really big. He mentioned something about table arrangements for 30 tables, plus installation pieces for the entryway and garden." Audrey's eyes gleamed with the excitement of a significant sale. This could be huge for the shop. It was a transparent ploy. Richard didn't need to order flowers from my shop when he had access to the most exclusive florists in the region. This was his way of forcing another meeting. "I'll call him," I said, already dreading the conversation. "Good. And Mom?" Audrey hesitated. "I was thinking maybe I could help with this event. I don't have classes next weekend, and with an order this size, you'll need the extra hands." The thought of Audrey at Westwood Estate, surrounded by Richard's world, sent a wave of anxiety through me, but I couldn't explain my reluctance without raising more questions. "We'll see," I said non-committally. "Let me talk to him first about what he actually needs." After Audrey left to make deliveries, I stared at the phone number she'd written down. Taking a deep breath, I dialed. "Josephine?" Richard answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting for my call. "Thank you for getting back to me. Audrey says you want to order flowers." I kept my voice businesslike. "For an event next weekend. The Meadowbrook Children's Hospital benefit. It's being held at the estate." His tone matched mine in professionalism. "I'd like Winter's Blooms to handle the arrangements." "Why my shop, Richard? There are dozens of high-end florists who regularly work with clients like you." Pause. "Because you're the best. Your work has always been exceptional. And it has nothing to do with creating an excuse to see me again?" I could almost hear his smile through the phone. "That would be a pleasant side effect, certainly. But the event is real, and I genuinely want your designs there." I sighed, knowing I should refuse but also aware that an order of this size would significantly boost my quarterly revenue. "Send me the details. I'll need to know the color scheme, the number of guests, the specific areas that need arrangements." "I can do better than that. I can show you the space. The ballroom has been renovated since you last saw it." The casual reference to my previous time at Westwood Estate hung between us. "That won't be necessary. Photos will be fine." "Josephine," his voice softened, "I'm not trying to complicate your life. This is a legitimate business opportunity. If you'd prefer to send one of your staff to do the site visit, I understand." The reasonable tone made me feel petty for my suspicion. "No, I'll come. It should be me if we're taking on an event of this scale." "Thank you. Tomorrow afternoon? Say, 2 o'clock. Fine. I'll be there." After hanging up, I pressed my palms against the cool countertop, steadying myself. Returning to Westwood Estate after all these years, the thought made my chest tight with anxiety. But I had built a successful business by never turning down opportunities, no matter how challenging. I wouldn't start now, even if this particular opportunity came wrapped in complicated history. That evening, as Audrey and I prepared dinner in our cozy kitchen, she broached the subject again. "So, are we doing the Westwood event?" She chopped vegetables with practiced efficiency, her movements reminiscent of my own. "I'm going to look at the space tomorrow," I said, focusing on the pasta sauce I was stirring. "Then I'll decide. Can I come with you? I don't have classes until 4. I hesitated. The thought of Audrey and Richard in the same space again, this time with me present, made my stomach knot with anxiety. But I couldn't keep them apart forever, especially if Richard had already begun to suspect the truth. "All right," I said finally. "But remember, this is a professional visit. We're there to assess the space and discuss the client's needs." Audrey rolled her eyes. "I know how to behave at a client meeting, Mom. I've been helping with the business since I was 15. Of course you do. I smiled, trying to hide my nervousness. I just want to make sure we maintain appropriate boundaries with Mr. Westwood. Because he's an old boyfriend? Audrey's direct gaze was too perceptive for comfort. Because he's a high-profile client, I corrected. And yes, because there's history there that makes things complicated. Audrey was quiet for a moment, focusing on her chopping. Then, without looking up, she asked, "Mom, is Richard Westwood my father?" The wooden spoon slipped from my fingers, clattering against the stovetop. "What? Why would you ask that?" "Because I'm not blind. Or stupid." She set down her knife, turning to face me fully. "You've never talked about my father. Ever. Then this wealthy man from your past shows up, and suddenly you're acting strange. Plus, the timing works out. You knew him 20 years ago. I'm 19. I gripped the edge of the counter, feeling as if the ground had shifted beneath my feet. I had always known this conversation would come someday, but I had imagined it happening on my terms, when I was prepared. "Audrey, just tell me the truth, Mom. Please." Her voice was steady, but I could see the vulnerability in her eyes. The little girl who had asked about her father on the first day of kindergarten, when all the other children had daddies to wave goodbye to. I took a deep breath. "Yes, Richard Westwood is your biological father." Audrey nodded slowly, as if confirming something she had already known. "Does he know about me?" "No." I moved the pasta sauce off the heat, buying myself a moment to gather my thoughts. When I left Meadowbrook, I didn't know I was pregnant. By the time I found out, I had already made the decision that Richard and I couldn't be together. Adding a baby to that situation seemed impossible. "So you never told him? All these years?" "I thought about it," I admitted, "many times. But the longer I waited, the harder it became to imagine making that call. And you and I were doing fine on our own, weren't we?" Audrey's expression softened slightly. "We were. We are. But Mom, he had a right to know. I had a right to know him." The gentle accusation stung, all the more because I knew she was right. "I was trying to protect you," I said quietly. "Richard's world, his family, their expectations. It's not an easy place to exist if you don't fit their mold. I didn't want you to feel the way I did when I was with them. But that should have been my choice to make." Audrey's voice was firm but not angry. "And his." I nodded, accepting the truth of her words. "You're right. I made a decision that affected 3 lives, based on my own fears and experiences. It wasn't fair to you or to Richard. Are you going to tell him tomorrow?" The question hung in the air between us. "Do you want me to?" Audrey considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Yes," she said finally. "I think I do. But I want to be there when you tell him." My heart raced at the thought of that conversation. The 3 of us in the same room, the truth finally spoken aloud after nearly 2 decades of silence. "Okay," I agreed. "We'll tell him together." Audrey stepped forward and hugged me tightly. "Thank you for being honest with me, Mom." Finally, as I held my daughter, I thought about the moment I had discovered I was pregnant. Alone in a small apartment in a new city, terrified and exhilarated all at once. I had made so many choices since then, some wise, some perhaps misguided. But the choice to raise this remarkable young woman, to pour all my love and energy into giving her a good life, that was one decision I would never regret. "I love you, Audrey," I whispered against her hair. "Everything I've done, every choice I've made, has been because I love you more than anything in this world." She pulled back, her eyes, so like mine, shining with emotion. "I know, Mom. I've always known that." As we finished preparing dinner, a strange calm settled over me. Tomorrow would bring a conversation I had avoided for 19 years. It would be difficult, painful even. But there was also a sense of relief in knowing that the truth would finally be spoken, that the weight of this secret would no longer rest solely on my shoulders. My queens, if you've ever had to choose between your heart and your dignity, hit that like button. We've all been there. The summer air was heavy with the scent of roses as Audrey and I drove through the imposing gates of Westwood Estate the following afternoon. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as memories washed over me. Moonlit gardens, stolen kisses, promises that had seemed so real at the time. Wow, Audrey breathed, taking in the sweeping driveway lined with ancient oak trees. This place is even more impressive in daylight. I managed a tight smile. The Westwoods have owned this property for 5 generations. The main house was built in 1910, but parts of the gardens are even older. And you spent time here? When you were with him? Yes. I didn't elaborate, unwilling to share those private memories, even with my daughter. Mostly in the gardens. Richard's grandfather was a passionate horticulturist. As we approached the circular driveway in front of the mansion, I spotted Richard waiting on the steps. He was dressed casually in khakis and a blue button-down shirt, but there was nothing casual about the way he watched our car approach, his posture alert and expectant. Ready? I asked Audrey, putting the car in park. She nodded, her expression determined. Ready. Richard stepped forward as we exited the car, his eyes moving between us with undisguised interest. Josephine, Audrey, thank you for coming. Mr. Westwood, Audrey said formally, extending her hand. Properly this time, without the delivery confusion. He smiled, taking her hand. Please call me Richard, and thank you for convincing your mother to consider this project. I'm here to assess the space, I said, keeping my tone professional. I haven't committed to anything yet. Richard nodded, accepting my boundaries. Of course. Shall we start with the ballroom? It's where most of the arrangements will be needed. He led us through the grand entrance hall, its marble floors and soaring ceilings exactly as I remembered. The house smelled the same. A subtle blend of beeswax polish and fresh flowers that instantly transported me back 20 years. I glanced at Audrey, watching her take in the opulence with wide eyes, and wondered if she was trying to imagine growing up in a place like this. The ballroom had indeed been renovated, its once heavy Victorian decor replaced with a lighter, more contemporary aesthetic. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the formal gardens, filling the space with natural light. The event will host approximately 300 guests, Richard explained, moving into business mode. Seated dinner at round tables, followed by dancing and the charity auction. The color scheme is navy and silver, with accents of burgundy. I nodded, already envisioning potential arrangements. And the entryway? You mentioned installation pieces. Yes, something dramatic for guests to see as they arrive. I trust your artistic judgment completely. As we discussed logistics, delivery times, setup requirements, budget, I could feel Audrey watching us, observing our interaction with keen interest. The professional conversation provided a buffer, allowing us all to adjust to being in the same space before addressing the elephant in the room. After we had toured the ballroom and entryway, Richard turned to us with a careful smile. Would you like to see the gardens? They're particularly beautiful this time of year. The invitation was clearly directed at Audrey, who nodded eagerly. I'd love to. Mom says your grandfather was a horticulturist. He was. Much of what you'll see was his design, though I've made some additions over the years. Richard glanced at me. If that's all right with you, Josephine? I nodded, knowing we couldn't delay the real conversation much longer. The gardens would be lovely. As we walked through the French doors onto the terrace, Richard fell into step beside Audrey, pointing out rare specimens and sharing anecdotes about his grandfather's passion for unusual plants. I followed slightly behind, watching my daughter's animated responses, the easy way she engaged with Richard's knowledge of botany. They looked nothing alike. Audrey had inherited my coloring, my features, but there was something in their mannerisms, the thoughtful way they considered each plant, that struck me with painful clarity. Nature or nurture, some essential part of Richard lived in Audrey, despite my efforts to keep their worlds separate. We reached the moonlight garden, its white blooms closed during daylight hours, but still beautiful in their sleeping state. Richard paused, glancing back at me with a question in his eyes. This was always my favorite part of the gardens, he said quietly. Mine too, I admitted, moving forward to join them. Audrey looked between us, sensing the shift in atmosphere. It's beautiful. But why is it called the Moonlight Garden? Because it's designed to be viewed after dark, Richard explained. Every plant either blooms white or has silver foliage. When the moon is full, the entire garden seems to glow. Mom and I have a small night garden on our back patio, Audrey said. Nothing like this, of course, but we have moonflowers and night-blooming jasmine. Richard's expression softened. Your mother taught you to appreciate plants, I see. She taught me everything, Audrey said simply. Then, with a directness that reminded me painfully of Richard himself, she added, including how to stand up for myself and speak the truth, even when it's difficult. The moment had arrived. I stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on Audrey's shoulder. Richard, there's something we need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago. His eyes met mine, and I saw in them a dawning realization. He had suspected, perhaps from the moment he saw Audrey's age, but had been waiting for me to confirm it. Audrey is your daughter, I said, the words finally spoken aloud after 19 years of silence. I discovered I was pregnant after I left Meadowbrook. I made the decision not to tell you. Richard's face went completely still, his eyes fixed on Audrey as if seeing her truly for the first time. My daughter, he repeated softly. Audrey stood tall under his scrutiny, her chin lifted in a gesture so reminiscent of her father that it made my heart ache. I just found out yesterday, she said, when I asked Mom directly. Richard nodded slowly, processing this information. Then he turned to me, his expression a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. 19 years, Josephine. You kept this from me for 19 years. Yes. I didn't offer excuses or explanations. Those would come later. In this moment, his anger, if that's what he was feeling, was justified. To my surprise, Richard didn't raise his voice or make accusations. Instead, he turned back to Audrey, his expression softening. I have a daughter, he said, as if testing the words. A brilliant, beautiful daughter who studies environmental science and delivers flowers to the wrong address. A small smile touched Audrey's lips, and who apparently inherited her love of plants from both parents. It would seem so, Richard hesitated, then asked, would it be all right if I hugged you? Audrey nodded, and Richard stepped forward, enfolding her in a careful embrace. Over her shoulder, his eyes met mine. Not angry, as I had feared, but filled with a complex mixture of wonder, grief for lost years, and something that looked remarkably like gratitude. Thank you, he mouthed silently. I nodded, tears pricking at my eyes as I watched my daughter, our daughter, embrace her father for the first time. Sisters, tag someone who showed incredible strength raising children on their own. These women deserve our recognition. The three of us moved to the terrace, settling at a wrought iron table beneath a pergola draped with wisteria. A silent staff member appeared with a tray of iced tea, then discreetly vanished, leaving us alone with the weight of 2 decades of secrets between us. I have so many questions, Richard said, his eyes moving between Audrey and me. I don't even know where to begin. I think Mom should explain first, Audrey said gently, about why she made the decisions she did. Richard nodded, turning his full attention to me. The intensity of his gaze, so familiar even after all these years, made my heart race. Yes, I'd like to hear that. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. How could I possibly condense 20 years of choices, fears, and justifications into a single conversation? After I left Meadowbrook, I moved to Philadelphia. I began. I had a cousin there who let me stay with her while I looked for work. I was devastated, Richard. The lunch with your mother had made it painfully clear that I would never be accepted in your world, that our relationship was causing problems for you professionally. My mother had no right to interfere, Richard said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Perhaps not, but she wasn't wrong about the realities we faced. I twisted my glass of tea, watching the condensation trail down the side. 2 weeks after I arrived in Philadelphia, I discovered I was pregnant. I was alone, heartbroken, with no job and barely enough money for rent. You could have called me, Richard said quietly. I would have helped. I would have wanted to know. I know that now. But at the time, I glanced at Audrey, who was listening intently. At the time, I couldn't imagine bringing a child into the situation I had just escaped. Your mother had made it clear that I wasn't suitable to be a Westwood. How would she have reacted to a grandchild born to the unsuitable woman? Richard's jaw tightened. That wouldn't have mattered to me, wouldn't it? You were 26, Richard, with your whole future mapped out. The board was already concerned about your relationship with me. A pregnancy would have forced your hand. Either publicly reject me and your child, or defy your family, the board, everything you'd been raised to value. You didn't give me the chance to make that choice, he said, an edge of bitterness in his voice. No, I didn't. I met his gaze directly. I made the choice I thought would cause the least pain for everyone involved. Was it the right decision? I don't know. But I can't regret the life Audrey and I built together. Audrey reached over and squeezed my hand, a silent gesture of support that brought tears to my eyes. Tell me about that life, Richard said, turning to Audrey. I've missed 19 years. I want to know everything. As Audrey began sharing stories from her childhood, her early fascination with plants, her academic achievements, her dreams for the future, I watched Richard's face. He listened with complete attention, asking thoughtful questions, his expression a mixture of pride and grief for all he had missed. You've done an extraordinary job raising her, he said to me during a pause in the conversation. She's remarkable. She is, I agreed, smiling at our daughter, though I can't take all the credit. Some of her best qualities come from you, her analytical mind, her determination, her ability to see the big picture. Richard's eyes softened. Thank you for saying that. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the terrace, Richard straightened in his chair. I know this is all very new, and we have much more to discuss, but I want to make one thing clear. I want to be part of Audrey's life going forward, in whatever capacity she's comfortable with. I'd like that, Audrey said without hesitation. I've always wondered about you, about this part of myself. And I want to help with your education, Richard continued. Josephine mentioned you're on scholarship, which is impressive. But I'd like to ensure you have no financial concerns, that you can focus entirely on your studies and future career. I tensed, my old pride rising to the surface. Audrey's doing fine with her scholarship. We've managed all these years without. Mom, Audrey interrupted gently. This isn't about you and me anymore. This is about me and my father too. The word father hung in the air between us, new and powerful. I nodded, acknowledging the truth of her statement. You're right. I'm sorry. Richard's expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the emotion in his eyes at hearing Audrey refer to him as her father. We can discuss the details later, he said. There's no rush to figure everything out today. As we prepared to leave, Richard walked us to our car, his movements hesitant, as if reluctant to see this momentous day end. Would you both come to dinner? He asked suddenly. Not today, but soon. Perhaps this weekend? I'd like to continue getting to know you, Audrey. And there's still much Josephine and I need to discuss. Audrey looked to me, waiting for my response. I hesitated, then nodded. Dinner would be fine. Saturday? Saturday is perfect. Richard smiled, the genuine warmth of it reminding me painfully of the young man who had once shown me his grandfather's moonlight garden. I'll text you the details. As we drove away from Westwood Estate, Audrey was quiet, processing the events of the afternoon. Finally, as we turned onto the main road back to town, she spoke. He seems like a good man. He is, I said softly. He always was. Then why did you really leave him, Mom? Was it just because of what his mother said? I sighed, keeping my eyes on the road. It was complicated, Audrey. His mother's intervention was part of it, yes. But there was more. Like what? I thought back to those final days before I left Meadowbrook, to the growing realization that had settled in my heart like a stone. I loved Richard deeply, but I began to see that loving him meant losing parts of myself. my independence, my identity separate from his world. The longer we were together, the more I felt myself becoming Richard Westwood's girlfriend rather than Josephine Calloway. And that scared you? Terrified me, I admitted. I watched my own mother disappear into my father's shadow, becoming an appendage to his life rather than a person in her own right. When he left us, she had to rebuild herself from scratch. I didn't want that for myself. Audrey considered this. But you were young then. You both were. People change, grow. They do, I agreed. And perhaps if we had met at a different time, in different circumstances, things might have worked out differently. But we can't rewrite the past, sweetheart. We can only move forward from where we are now. And where is that, exactly? Audrey asked, her perceptive gaze studying my profile. Where are you and Richard now? I shook my head slightly. I don't know. Co-parents, I suppose. Or we will be, once we figure out what that looks like after 19 years of separation. Just co-parents? There was a hint of something in her voice. Hope, perhaps, or simple curiosity. Just co-parents, I confirmed, ignoring the small flutter in my chest that suggested otherwise. Richard and I had our chance a long time ago. This isn't about us anymore. It's about you. Audrey nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. If you say so, Mom. The memory of that lunch with Eleanor Westwood remained crystal clear, even after 2 decades. I had arrived at the exclusive country club nervous but determined to make a good impression. Richard had been called away on unexpected business to New York, and his mother had suggested we use the opportunity to get to know each other better. I wore my best dress, a simple blue sheath I had purchased specifically for occasions when I accompanied Richard to more formal events. Eleanor Westwood was already seated when I arrived, elegant in a cream suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Josephine, dear, thank you for joining me. Her smile was perfectly pleasant, revealing nothing of her true thoughts. I've taken the liberty of ordering champagne. We should celebrate. Celebrate? I asked, confused as I took my seat. Richard's promotion, of course. The board voted this morning to make him Executive Vice President of Sustainability and Innovation. It's the position he's been working toward for years. She studied me over the rim of her champagne flute. He hasn't told you yet? No, he's been in New York since yesterday. We haven't spoken. Ah, well, I'm sure he planned to surprise you. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. In any case, it's a significant step. The youngest EVP in company history. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. Richard has been passionate about bringing sustainable practices to Westwood Industries. This will give him the platform to implement real change. Eleanor nodded, her expression thoughtful. Yes, he's always been idealistic. Gets that from his grandfather. She set down her glass, her manner shifting subtly. Josephine, I hope you don't mind my directness, but I've asked you here today to discuss something important. Something concerning you and Richard. My stomach tightened with apprehension. Of course. You seem like a lovely girl. Intelligent, well-spoken, clearly devoted to my son. Under different circumstances, I might be delighted by Richard's interest in you. Her voice remained pleasant, but her eyes had hardened. But surely you must realize that Richard's position, especially now, comes with certain expectations. Expectations? I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. The Westwood name carries significant weight in business and social circles. Richard's choice of partner reflects not just on him personally, but on the company, on our family legacy. She reached across the table, patting my hand in a gesture that felt more condescending than comforting. The board has already expressed concern about his relationship with someone of your background. The champagne turned sour in my mouth. My background. No family connections, no social standing, the daughter of a landscaper. She stated these facts without malice, as if simply reading from a resume. Several board members have questioned whether Richard's judgment in his personal life might affect their confidence in his professional decisions. That's absurd, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Richard's personal relationships have nothing to do with his business acumen. In an ideal world, perhaps. But we don't live in an ideal world, Josephine. We live in one where perception matters, where the markets respond to confidence, where family legacy and tradition still carry weight. She leaned forward, her voice softening to something almost maternal. Richard is at a crucial point in his career. This promotion opens doors that will allow him to implement the environmental initiatives he's so passionate about. Do you really want to be the reason those doors close? The question hit me like a physical blow. Are you asking me to end my relationship with your son? I'm asking you to consider what's truly best for Richard, for his future, for the causes he cares about. Eleanor's expression was sympathetic but unyielding. He believes he can have everything, his position at Westwood, his plans for transforming the company. But the reality is more complicated. The old guard on the board, the investors, the partners, they're watching his every move, especially now. Richard wouldn't care about their opinions, I said, though doubt had begun to creep into my heart. Perhaps not today, but what about a year from now? 5 years? When his initiatives are blocked, when his proposals are rejected, when he watches his vision for the company wither because the board lost faith in his judgment. She shook her head sadly. He would resent you, Josephine. Perhaps not immediately, but eventually. And that resentment would poison whatever love exists between you now. I sat in stunned silence, her words echoing in my mind. Was she right? Would Richard eventually blame me for the obstacles in his path? Would his love turn to resentment as his professional dreams slipped away? Think about it, dear, Eleanor said gently. If you truly love my son, you'll want what's best for him. Sometimes love means letting go. I left that lunch with my world shattered, Eleanor Westwood's words replaying in my mind like a poisonous mantra. 3 days later, after nights of agonized deliberation, I packed my belongings and left Meadowbrook, leaving only a letter that explained nothing of the real reason for my departure. It was the hardest decision I had ever made. Until, weeks later, I discovered I was carrying Richard's child, and faced an even more impossible choice. The Saturday evening dinner at Westwood Estate felt surreal. My daughter dressed in her best outfit, excited to spend time with the father she had just discovered. Richard greeting us at the door with careful warmth. The three of us seated in the formal dining room where I had once felt so out of place as Richard's girlfriend. I thought we'd keep it simple tonight, Richard said as a staff member served the first course. Just the three of us, getting to know each other better. This is your idea of simple? Audrey asked, glancing around at the crystal chandelier, the antique silver, the fine china. Richard smiled ruefully. Fair point, but I meant simple in terms of company. No extended family, no staff beyond what's necessary for serving dinner. I appreciated the consideration. The thought of facing Eleanor Westwood again after all these years was more than I could handle, especially with the revelation of Audrey's existence still so fresh. Is your mother still living at the estate? I asked, trying to sound casual. No. She moved to the Palm Beach house permanently about 5 years ago. Richard's expression revealed little about his relationship with his mother now. My father passed away 10 years ago. Heart attack. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. Despite my complicated feelings about the Westwood family, I wouldn't wish that loss on anyone. Richard nodded in acknowledgement, then turned to Audrey with a smile. So, tell me more about your studies. Environmental science is a broad field. Do you have a specific area of interest? As Audrey enthusiastically described her research on urban green spaces and their impact on community well-being, I watched Richard's face. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that revealed his own knowledge of environmental issues. The similarities between them, in their mannerisms, their analytical approach, their passion for making a difference, were striking now that I allowed myself to see them. You know, Richard said during a pause in the conversation, Westwood Industries has a foundation that funds environmental research and implementation. We offer internships each summer for promising students in the field. Audrey's eyes lit up. Really? What kind of projects? Everything from wetland restoration to sustainable urban development. This year we're focusing on green infrastructure in underserved communities. He glanced at me as if seeking permission. If you're interested, I could arrange for you to meet the foundation director. No special treatment, of course, you'd apply like any other candidate, but I think your research focus would align well with our current initiatives. I nodded slightly, giving my approval. This was exactly the kind of opportunity Audrey deserved, regardless of her connection to Richard. I'd love that, Audrey said eagerly. My advisor has been encouraging me to look for hands-on experience to complement my coursework. As dinner progressed, the initial awkwardness gradually eased. Richard shared stories about his grandfather's passion for horticulture, which delighted Audrey. She, in turn, told him about her childhood experiments growing plants in our small backyard, her science fair projects, her dreams of designing urban spaces that integrated nature seamlessly into city environments. I contributed occasionally but mostly observed, struck by how easily they connected despite the years of separation. Nature or nurture, the bond between them was undeniable, a shared wavelength that needed no explanation or effort. After dessert, Audrey excused herself to use the restroom, leaving Richard and me alone for the first time that evening. "She's extraordinary, Josephine," he said quietly. "You've done an amazing job raising her." "Thank you." I traced the rim of my water glass, gathering courage for what I needed to say. "Richard, about the past. About why I left without telling you about the pregnancy. I want you to know that I never intended to hurt you. I thought I was making the right decision for everyone involved." "Including me?" There was no accusation in his tone, just genuine curiosity. "Especially you," I admitted. "Your mother made it clear that our relationship was already causing problems with the board. A pregnancy would have forced your hand. Either abandon your career aspirations or resent us for limiting them." Richard's expression darkened. "My mother had no right to interfere. I searched for you, Josephine, for months after you disappeared. This revelation stunned me." "You did." "Of course I did. I loved you." The simple past tense hung between us, a reminder of all we had lost. "But you'd vanished completely. No forwarding address, no mutual friends who knew your whereabouts. I was scared," I confessed. "Scared of being rejected, scared of being a burden, scared of raising a child in a world where she wouldn't be fully accepted." Before Richard could respond, Audrey returned, her eyes bright with excitement. "Your housekeeper just showed me photos of the moonlight garden at night. It's breathtaking. Could we see it sometime when it's in bloom?" Richard smiled, the tension between us momentarily set aside. "Of course. The night-blooming jasmine is particularly spectacular in June." As the evening drew to a close, Richard walked us to our car. "I'd like to establish some regular time with Audrey, if that's all right with both of you. Perhaps Sunday brunches to start." "I'd love that," Audrey said immediately. I nodded my agreement. "That sounds perfect." Richard hesitated, then added, "And Josephine, I hope you and I can continue our conversation sometime. There's still much left unsaid between us." "Yes," I agreed softly. "There is." Over the following weeks, a new rhythm established itself in our lives. Richard and Audrey met regularly for Sunday brunches, occasionally joined by me when it felt appropriate. He attended her university research presentation, sitting proudly in the front row. She toured the Westwood Foundation offices, meeting the environmental team and learning about their initiatives. I watched their relationship blossom with a mixture of joy and wistfulness. Joy for my daughter, who was finally connecting with the father she had always wondered about. Wistfulness for the years lost, the family we might have been under different circumstances. Richard and I maintained a careful cordiality, focusing on co-parenting Audrey rather than addressing the unresolved feelings between us. But occasionally, when our hands accidentally touched passing a coffee cup, or our eyes met across a room while watching Audrey, I felt the old connection, altered by time and experience, but not entirely extinguished. One evening in late November, Richard called me directly rather than texting as had become our habit. "Josephine, I need to ask a favor," he said, his voice unusually hesitant. "The Children's Hospital benefit is this weekend, and I'm still hoping winter's blooms will handle the flowers. I had been so caught up in the personal revelations that I'd nearly forgotten about the original business request. Of course, I've already ordered the flowers and designed the arrangements. We'll deliver and set up on Saturday morning. Thank you, but that's not the favor. He paused. I'd like you to attend the gala, as my guest. The invitation caught me off guard. Richard. Not as a date, he clarified quickly. As Audrey's mother. She's already agreed to come, her first official appearance as a Westwood. I think she'd feel more comfortable with you there. I hesitated, remembering the discomfort I'd felt at such events 20 years ago. I don't know. Please, Josephine. For Audrey. Put that way, how could I refuse? All right. For Audrey. The night of the gala arrived with a flurry of nervous preparation. I chose a simple but elegant midnight blue gown, classic enough to avoid looking like I was trying too hard. Audrey, stunning in emerald green that matched her eyes, my eyes, but with Richard's intensity, paced our living room with uncharacteristic anxiety. What if they all stare at me? What if they ask questions I can't answer? I took her hands, stilling her nervous movement. They probably will stare, because you're beautiful and brilliant and new to their world. As for questions, just be your authentic self. You have nothing to prove to anyone. Richard sent a car for us, and as we approached the estate, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. How many times had I made this drive as a young woman, heart racing with a mixture of excitement and insecurity. Now I returned as a successful business owner, a mother, a woman who had built a life on her own terms. The ballroom was transformed by the arrangements my team had created, elegant compositions of white roses, silver eucalyptus, and deep burgundy dahlias that complemented the navy and silver color scheme perfectly. Richard found us immediately, handsome in his tuxedo, his eyes warming as they moved from Audrey to me. You both look beautiful, he said sincerely. Audrey, are you ready to meet some people? As Richard introduced our daughter to colleagues and friends, I watched from a slight distance, giving them space to establish themselves as father and daughter. The reactions varied from polite surprise to genuine warmth, but Richard handled each interaction with grace, his pride in Audrey evident to everyone. Josephine Calloway, or is it Winters now? I turned to find Eleanor Westwood standing beside me, elegant as ever despite her advanced years. My heart raced with sudden anxiety. Mrs. Westwood, I didn't realize you would be here tonight. I wouldn't miss my son's annual charity gala. Her eyes moved to where Richard and Audrey stood talking with the hospital director. So it's true. You had Richard's child and never told him. The direct accusation made me straighten my spine. Yes, a decision I've had to live with for 19 years. A decision that deprived my son of his daughter, and me of my granddaughter. There was genuine pain beneath the criticism. I believed I was protecting them both, I said quietly. Perhaps I was wrong, but I can't change the past, only move forward from here. Eleanor studied me for a long moment. She looks like you, but she has Richard's manner, the way she listens, analyzes before speaking. A hint of approval colored her voice. He tells me she's brilliant. Environmental science at Laurelwood. Yes, on full scholarship. You raised her well, it seems. The admission clearly cost her something. Despite everything. Before I could respond, Richard appeared at my side, his expression tightening as he saw his mother. Mother, I didn't know you were coming. Clearly, Eleanor's gaze moved between us. I've just been getting reacquainted with Josephine, and observing my granddaughter from afar. Would you like to meet her properly? Richard asked, his tone cautious. I would, if Josephine has no objection. Both turned to me, waiting for my response. I thought of the lunch 20 years ago, of the pain Eleanor's interference had caused. But I also saw the genuine desire in her eyes to know her granddaughter. Of course, I said finally. Audrey should know her grandmother. As Richard led his mother away to introduce her to Audrey, I slipped outside onto the terrace, needing a moment alone. The night air was cool against my skin, the gardens below silvered by moonlight. So much had changed in 20 years, yet standing here felt strangely familiar. The same stars overhead, the same scent of roses drifting up from the gardens. "Are you all right?" Richard's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him watching me with concern. "Yes, just needed some air." "How did the introduction go?" "Surprisingly well. Audrey is charming my mother completely." He moved to stand beside me at the balustrade. "She's resilient, our daughter. Adaptable." "She is." I smiled at the casual "our daughter," the way it acknowledged our shared connection. "Josephine," Richard's voice softened. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said weeks ago." I turned to face him fully. "What is it?" "I never married." The simple statement hung in the night air between us. There have been relationships over the years, but nothing lasting. Nothing that compared to what we had that summer. My heart beat faster at his confession. "Richard, I'm not telling you this to pressure you or to suggest we can simply pick up where we left off. Too much has happened. Too many years have passed." His eyes held mine steadily. "But I want you to know that what we had was real to me. The most real thing I've ever experienced." The honesty in his voice touched something deep inside me, a place I had carefully protected for 19 years. "It was real for me too," I admitted. "That's why leaving was so painful." "Do you think?" He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "Do you think we could start again? Not from where we were, but from where we are now. Two people who share a remarkable daughter and a complicated history." I looked at this man who had once been the center of my world, who was now the father of my child, who stood before me not as the young heir with everything to prove but as a man who had lived, learned, and grown just as I had. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I think I'd like to find out." Richard smiled, that same smile that had captivated me in a moonlit garden 2 decades earlier. "That's enough for now." As we returned to the ballroom, where Audrey was deep in conversation with her newly discovered grandmother, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. The circle that had broken 20 years ago was not mended. Too much time had passed for that, but perhaps a new circle was forming, one that encompassed all we had been and all we might become. The past couldn't be rewritten. The years lost couldn't be reclaimed. But the future stretched before us, unwritten and full of possibility. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories that remind us it's never too late for healing and new beginnings.